Hello, everyone. I'll be sharing with you this time the upcoming adult Sunday school lesson for December the 10th. It is called The Faith of David. It comes from 1 Samuel, and the verses and chapters highlighted in your material was chapter 17, verses 31 to 37, verse 45, and verses 48 to 50. The book of 1 Samuel begins with the birth of Samuel, God's prophet and the last judge. It then moves to the people demanding a king and Saul being chosen. Although tall Saul was king, Samuel was the spiritual leader of the Hebrew people. The choosing of a king never settled well with Samuel, particularly Saul. He believed that the liabilities of having a king outweighed the benefits, and when Saul overstepped those boundaries, Samuel regretted choosing Saul. He began to ask God who would be a suitable replacement, and God chose David. Chapter 16 details Samuel going to the home of Jesse to find the next king. And he found God's man, the next king, in the eighth and youngest son of Jesse, named David. At that moment, David would have been a teenager, perhaps 16 to 18 years of age, and Samuel anointed him with oil to be the next king. 16:13 tells us that God's Spirit came powerfully upon David that day. In the next section, chapter 16, verses 14 to 23, David is called into the royal palace to play music to comfort the distressed and melancholy King Saul. This began a rather strange relationship between the current King Saul and the future King David. Listen to verses 21 to 23. When David came to Saul and entered his service, Saul loved him very much, and David became his armor bearer. Then Saul sent word to Jesse, "Let David remain in my service, for he has found favor with me." Whenever the evil spirit from God came on Saul, David would pick up his lyre, Lyre, a musical instrument somewhat like a harp, and play, and Saul would be relieved, feel better, and the evil spirit would leave him. Obviously, the music allayed some of Saul's depression and melancholy. Chapter 17 begins with the forces of Philistia and Israel gathered for war. Both armies were in battle formation. However, the Philistines' plan for victory lay in the person of their great giant named Goliath. He stood over 9 feet tall, was covered with military armor. He was a mighty killing machine. The challenge from Goliath and Philistia was for the Hebrews to choose one warrior to fight Goliath, man to man, winner take all. For 40 days, there was no action. For David and his family, much was at stake as his three older brothers were in the Hebrew army. It became clear, however, that no one in Saul's army was willing to take on the great giant. Neither was King Saul himself. Then in verse 32, David told King Saul that he would fight Goliath. When Saul called him unqualified, David recounted how he had killed lions and bears, deadly animals who had tried to attack his father's flocks. David was an expert with the deadly slingshot. He knew that if he could hit and kill moving targets like lions and bears, that he could hit the giant Goliath and kill him, while others were saying that Goliath was too big to fight. David was saying that Goliath is too big to miss. At this point, one could say that the faith of David, the lesson title, was that David had confidence, supreme faith and confidence in his physical abilities. He knew it was possible, even probable, that he would win against Goliath. But David also saw that this was a spiritual battle, that God would win the battle. Chapter 17, verse 45 and following says, David said to Goliath, "You come against me with a sword, spear, and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord of armies, the God of Israel. Today the Lord will hand you over to me. Today I will strike you down, remove your head, and give the Philistine corpses over to the birds and wild animals to eat. Then all the world will know that Israel has a God. The battle is the Lord's. He will hand you over to us." The rest of chapter 17 details that David did to the giant Goliath just as he had predicted and promised. David had 5 smooth stones with him, but he only needed one. His first shot at the giant struck the mark right into Goliath's forehead. Goliath fell forward in a great crash. Apparently, this stone killed Goliath at that moment, but as promised, David rushed in and took Goliath's sword and severed his head. At that moment, all the Philistines sought to run away, but many were captured and killed. Verse 52 says, Philistine bodies were strewn all along the Shaaraim road to Gath and Ekron. The faith of David, what was it like? 3 points. First, David depended upon past results. In our world, we have something called a resume. It is an indicator of whether we can do a job based upon past experiences. The problem with a resume is that we highlight our successes and overlook our failures. Therefore, before hiring someone, we might want to talk to other people, past employers, work associates, and get a sense of work ethic and ability from a neutral source. David knew what he could do. He was not just boasting or blowing smoke. And to me, it also makes sense that if you are so accurate with your weapon that you can hit and kill moving targets like bears and lions, that skill would be transferable to kill a giant like Goliath. It is good to have faith and confidence in your abilities. Secondly, David needed agility, not King Saul's armor. David tried on King Saul's armor, but it did not fit. Saul was a bigger man than David. It was not a one-size-fits-all. Furthermore, David knew that in this encounter, he needed agility more than he needed protection. David was young, strong, and fast. He knew that he could run circles around Goliath, the slow, heavily laden giant. He could tell also which parts of Goliath's bodies were exposed, and apparently there weren't very many, but the face was exposed, at least so that David could land a clean and deadly shot to the forehead. Thirdly, David called the battle the Lord's battle, not his. God himself was fighting for Israel. This was the important lesson, the most important of all. In the author's introduction on page 12 of the Learner's Guide, it is noted that David made 9 references to God and only 2 about Goliath. Thus, David's clear focus and belief was in the power of God to help him win the battle. David knew his spiritual faith that he would win. This was a spiritual battle for the heart and soul of Israel, and God would win for his people. A lesson for all of us: when we're in battle, understand it's a spiritual battle. Go to the Lord in prayer, seek him, be obedient. God bless. Have a great week.